Okay, so we're back here to talk about Trump, Tara Reade exposing Joe Biden, Justin Trudeau cracking down on truthers, basically being what will happen when the New World Order takes over and all alternative media will be suppressed. And anybody caught saying anything, promoting anything that is against the mainstream agenda will be rounded up. Let's get into it. Hard Talk Radio, live in 4K.
Through the centuries, the Jews have endured terrible persecution, and you know that. We've all read it, we've studied it. They've gone through a lot. And those seeking their destruction, we will seek their destruction. And when you have crimes like this, whether it's this one or another one on another group, we have to bring back the death penalty. They have to pay the ultimate price. They have to pay the ultimate price. They can't do this. They can't do this to our country. We must draw a line in the sand and say very strongly, never again.
What about what the Zionist Jews are doing to America? What about that? What about controlling the media of what we see, what goes on in Israel? What about that? What about the hatred towards non-Jews? What about that? That's what I wonder. I mean, yes, Hamas, which was created by the Israeli government, is a threat. So is Islam. But what about Zionism? Isn't that a threat to America too? Okay. Why isn't that talked about? Just saying. Raging lunatics. Trump proposes death penalty for pro-Palestinian campus protesters. All right. And my thing is it's a little extreme, very extreme, to propose the death penalty for pro-Palestinian college protesters, college students. You want to kill college students. GOP presidential candidate Donald Trump has called for the death penalty for pro-Palestinian college campus protesters, describing them as raging lunatics and Hamas sympathizers, and declaring we can't let them do this to our country. All right. And you've heard through the centuries, Jews have endured terrible persecution. And you know that. We've all read it. We've all said it. They've gone through it a lot, said Trump. Those seeking the Jews' destruction, we will seek their destruction. Okay. When you have crimes like this, whether it's this one or that one or another group, we have to bring the death penalty. They must pay the ultimate price. They can't do this. And the crowd is cheering, right? You don't see something wrong with this. These are college students that you want to unalive. And if people agree with this, or what Trump wants to do in this particular fashion, then who's to say when it comes down to whatever else he may see that, merits the death penalty? Okay? Because let's just be honest, Trump is being controlled you know, by Zionists. He works for Zionists. Okay? He doesn't care about the American people. He never has. All right? And what he's about is about pleasing the Zionist order. No matter what they do. No matter the fact that Benjamin Netanyahu got intelligence from, the Egyptian officials saying that, Hamas is coming within 3 days. And Netanyahu could have prevented that slaughter on October 7th, but he didn't. And he told his military to shut down the Iron Dome. That could have saved a lot of lives. He shut it down. He shut down protection for those Israeli citizens. And they were slaughtered. Trump doesn't want to call that out. But you want to give the death penalty for teenagers, for people just simply having their right to the First Amendment, free speech. What is so wrong with that? People really think that Trump is really, the people's president. They really think that. You thought that with Obama, and what happened? Let's talk about Tara Reade right now. Like I will say, people really have to be prepared for when Trump comes back in office. Okay? Because that's what it's going to take to see who he really is. But let's get into Tara Reade right now. Talking about Biden weaponizing the FBI and the Department of Justice against Americans. Tara Reade has accused the Biden administration of weaponizing government institutions to silence Americans and the 2021 Capitol riots participants. Reade, former Senate aide turned whistleblower, was previously targeted over her credible sexual assault allegations against the U.S. President Joe Biden. She has now moved to Russia seeking political asylum. Russia Today reports in the wake of her 23-minute interview with American journalist Tucker Carlson, which aired on Thursday, Reade told RT she hopes her example will motivate others to come forward and tell their stories. Been contacted a couple of times in the past by women who want to come forward, but because of what happened to me, they were too frightened. Although Reade's claims that Biden assaulted her in 1993 did not surface until the 2020 election campaign, she said she had logged a report with the Senate right after the purported incident and was still trying to get the report files unsealed. The election year is just bringing it to light because I think there's other corruption that needs to come to light about Biden, particularly the misconduct he's done around Ukraine and the money laundering and other activities that he and his family have been enriched by. In this proxy war, the U.S. and NATO are fighting against Russia via Ukraine, Reade explained. She added that while people in America and other NATO countries are seeing the corruption, the leaders of those states are unfortunately still benefiting. After sharing details of the alleged assault, Reade described the weaponization of the government coming after me. That was quite frightening and coming after my family. She just said the Carlson interview shows the public is becoming more aware of this. Let's see what she has to say.
Joe Biden accuser Tara Reade spoke with American journalist Tucker Carlson about how she's been targeted by the U.S. government and forced to exile in Russia.
There's a sealed case against you. They're investigating you for a crime. They won't tell you what the crime is.
Right.
But it clearly is a felony, or they claim it's a felony.
Right.
Correct?
And I posted the sealed warrant, and that's been in the media. So the sealed warrant is visible. You can see the case number. Journalists have tried to look it up.
Fair use, by the way.
My attorneys tried to look it up. No one will tell them what it is. Then they started coming at me in more subvert ways, which was, basically harassment, death threats. Particularly it amped up when Marjorie Taylor Greene and Representative Matt Gaetz asked me to testify in the whistleblowers panel. Like I was going to talk about how difficult it is to be a whistleblower because I've been so targeted.
Well, joining us in the studio now is the lady herself, former Senate aide Tara Reade. And full disclosure, she is also an RT contributor. Many thanks for coming in today, Tara. It's lovely to see you, as always.
Thank you so much.
So, I understand that you were interviewed by Tucker Carlson while he was here to interview Putin and some other people as well. How did the experience of sharing your story with Tucker differ from previous interviews or interactions you've had regarding the matter?
Well, the first time I was interviewed, we were more into the, what actually happened, and that was at a home studio in Florida. So it was a different vibe, right? And then, and then other times it was just remotely. I was on his show. So this was quite different, seeing him in person, and it was really nice to see him, and he was very welcoming, and we've been staying in touch. So it was good. And I feel like some parts were left out. We talked for over an hour. The interview's only 23 minutes. And one of the things I had told him was my impressions of Russia and how much I liked it here. I had talked about, in my book that's coming out, that I had talked about Margarita Simenon, who had really been a hero for me because RT, I had been working for them, but then they brought me in when all of this happened. They stood by me, and she had sent me a message, Tara, we will never leave you. And it was so touching. And I that didn't make it into the interview that he released, but it was there, and it's in my book. So you can read about it when that comes out in 2 weeks. And, it's really important to have gratitude. I was, I remember talking to you when I first came here a year ago. I was in a lot of pain, being separated from my family. And right now I have so much gratitude, and I've really come to love Russia so much that it feels so good to live here and to have a career here. So, it's kind of having a happier ending, if you will, right?
Well, yeah, absolutely. When Tucker Carlson interviews somebody, it's going to be watched by a lot of people. So what kind of response are you expecting to your interview with him?
Well, overnight, it happened while I was sleeping. And then so I saw a bunch of reaction overnight and of course, I've been getting some calls and whatnot, and it's all been really positive and supportive because I think people are seeing the political weaponization of the DOJ and FBI against American citizens and other citizens. One of the things I also talk about publicly is there are other people here under asylum. Their governments are coming after them in a weaponized way, the same way the Biden administration is using intelligence to go after Americans. So it's not just me, it's January 6th supporters, it's people on the left, the Uhuru group. So it's really important for me to continue to speak out and continue my legal action against the FBI and DOJ, which I'm doing.
So is it important for you to tell your story so that others might come out and tell their horror stories of Joe Biden, for instance?
Actually, that's happened. I've been contacted a couple of times in the past by women that wanted to come forward, but because of what happened to me, were too frightened. My hope was if I could testify before Congress, that would be a mechanism for them to come forward. And, I really was open and shared all the details.
So with that being said, okay, with all this going on, why isn't this coming out? That's what you got to ask about Biden. We already know all the dirty laundry about Trump, okay, and sexual assault cases. I mean, sexual assault, he sexually assaulted a 13-year-old girl. Hanging out with John Casablancas. We already know about that. But what about when it comes to Biden? I mean, there's dirt on him too. Okay. His daughter had a diary of the things that, Biden has done to her. There's stuff about him and his female loved ones that he has done in public, okay, and yet that is swept under the rug. It's going to be pretty interesting seeing how this turns out, and hopefully this will be shown to mainstream media. Hopefully this will get out. All right. Because Biden doesn't deserve a second term. He does not deserve a second term at all. You have all this anger and hate towards Trump. well, Biden is also equally deserving of that hate. Not for promoting hating anyone, but I do see that the fact of you got to be fair in this situation. And I would say the fact of, since we already see that voting really doesn't count anymore when voting for presidents, I would just say to sit out this election. You know, can't say choosing lesser of the two evils when you're still choosing evil. So let's talk about Mr. Justin Trudeau.
He said, in his opinion, it would be likely Meta would work. He said,
This is how he's talking about still being able to suppress alternative media.
He said, in his opinion, it would be likely Meta would work with Canada. We interviewed law professor Michael Geist last week, and he told us that, in his view, Meta would unblock news in Canada if the Online News Act were changed. Will your government compromise with Meta so that Canadians could once again post news on Facebook?
Meta, Facebook, has made the decision that they shouldn't have to compensate hardworking journalists telling local news stories. It is a decision by Meta that makes billions of dollars of profit all around the world, that they have no accountability to journalists that actually tell local stories, work hard to actually make sure people are properly informed, and instead make money off of sharing of information without recognizing the role they must play in a strong, independent media that is enhancing our democracies. This is a test moment where countries are going to have to realize that either we stand up for journalism and the profession, faced with internet giants that refuse to actually participate in it, or we bow down to them and allow them to make billions more dollars while degrading the safety, well-being, and communities that thrive in our democracy. I know there are a lot of people.
Well, it's not what he really means. This is what he really means. One minute. Okay, there we go.
Mr. Justin Trudeau has ordered the Canadian military to track and trace so-called conspiracy theorists who disapprove of his WF-inspired agenda as the global elite's war against dissenters goes into overdrive. According to Canadian sources, military personnel and police officers are going door to door in select provinces, performing so-called wellness checks on behalf of the Trudeau regime. However, in reality, these wellness checks are nothing more than the Trudeau regime's latest ruse to punish those who oppose the globalist agenda and exclude them from society. Trudeau has already exposed his authoritarian nature, issuing gun confiscation orders, freezing protesters' bank accounts.
You hear that? Closing people's bank accounts.
And issuing threats about crushing the Freedom Convoy with tanks. But if you think the panicked Trudeau government let the authoritarian WF agenda influence government policy, you haven't seen anything yet. Young global leader Justin Trudeau has embraced Klaus Schwab's dystopian agenda more fully than any other world leader. Schwab declared war on so-called conspiracy theorists during the so-called COVID pandemic, and Justin Trudeau was quick to follow suit, clumsily railing against critical thinkers in Canadian society who could see through his lies. According to Trudeau, conspiracy theorists are to blame for all the ills of modern society, including the fact that nobody trusts the mainstream media anymore.
There is out there a deliberate undermining of mainstream media. There are the conspiracy theorists, there are the social media drivers who are trying to do everything they can to keep people in their little filter bubbles, to prevent people from actually agreeing on a common set of facts, the way, the CBC and CTV, when they were our only sources of news, used to project across the country at least a common understanding of things.
The Trudeau regime has now introduced an Orwellian law called the Online Harms Bill C-63, which will give police the power to retroactively search the internet for hate speech.
Canada and anyone who has ever posted hate speech online. Nazi Germany. That's why I said he was going full Nazi. We're slowly losing our free speech here in America. Can't even talk about the little, let's say the jibby jabber. We can't talk about that much anymore, even though the truth about the jibby jabber is coming out. Chris Cuomo has come out about the jibby jabber and has vindicated Joe Rogan. Remember when he mocked him about taking that certain eye medicine that starts with the letter I? Everybody mocked him for it, but guess what? He was right. Let's keep going.
Violations and arrest offenders, even if the alleged offence occurred before the law existed. The real shocker in this bill is the alarming retroactive aspect. Essentially, under this law, whatever you've said in the past can now be weaponised against you by today's extreme woke standards. Historian Dr. Muriel Blave has weighed in on this draconian law, labelling it outright mad, and pointing out that even Orwell's thought police didn't go as far as Trudeau. One has to wonder, with this new bill on the table, shouldn't Justin Trudeau be facing fines or perhaps even jail time for his numerous historical blackface performances? But in all seriousness, this is bone-chilling, dystopian stuff coming out of Canada. And don't think it couldn't happen here in the US and the rest of the Western world, because that's exactly what the globalists are planning.
Dans ce nouveau monde, on doit accepter une transparence, et je dirais même une transparence totale. Le secret bancaire, tout va être transparent. Et il faut s'habituer, il faut se comporter ainsi. Ça devient, comment dirais-je, intégré dans votre personnalité, mais si on n'a rien à cacher, il ne faut pas avoir peur.
When Klaus says jump, the mainstream media says how high? And they're already making the case for total government surveillance as we speak. As Benjamin Franklin said, those who would give up essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety.
And that's what's happening. Okay, when 2019 hit 2020, and you know what went down, people were just giving away their liberties. Okay, even liberties to what they should do with their own bodies. Their own bodily autonomy, they gave it up just to go to the movies, all right? Just to go to the club, just to eat out. You could just buy groceries and just eat in. People caved in, okay? And you see now that people are now paying the price for that. And if you do just give in, do you really deserve liberty and safety if you so easily give in to the government, knowing that the government cannot be trusted, has a track record of not being able to be trusted? Just saying.
Coming up next, we've got footage of Trudeau sending military and law enforcement officers door to door to rat out so-called conspiracy theorists and dissenters who oppose the globalist agenda. Benjamin Franklin will be rolling in his grave. The globalists are trying to make us all poorer and destroy. Trudeau is attempting to suppress dissent against the establishment by introducing fines of up to $70,000 per offence and life in prison for what the government deem online hate speech. Fact-checkers and liberals south of the border have dismissed claims that the Trudeau regime is moving into full-scale dictatorial mode, and the freedom of Canadians is now on a knife edge. According to the liberal media, the Trudeau regime would have to mobilise the military and law enforcement to monitor every Canadian household for hate speech, which is a step they would never take, right? Oh. Truth Seeker 01011 and Tyrant Patrol report on these disturbing events in Canada.
Did you guys hear that the Canadian Armed Forces are doing a door-to-door wellness check exercise called Trillium Ventures? And they are going door-to-door in smaller communities in Northern Ontario, including the local police that are helping them. And they're basically asking, how are you doing? And are you prepared in case of a giant emergency? They are also giving out brochures of everything that you should have in case of an emergency and to be ready, because emergency preparedness starts with you. This article from True North Wire is stating that the Canadian Armed Forces will be part of an extreme heat scenario exercise in communities throughout the Huron County, Ontario. The exercise, called Trillium Venture, will take place from May 3rd to 5th. And according to the OPP, the Ontario Police Department press release, the purpose of the exercise is to enhance an interoperability with the governmental departments as they work together to respond to a simulated extreme heat scenario. My first question is what is this extreme heat scenario? Are you talking temperatures? Or are we talking about maybe an attack or a simulated attack? Because we all know the World Economic Forum likes to predict everything that's going to happen with a lot of accuracy for the future. But Daisy Media went up there and interviewed individual Canadian military force personnel. And one said that this is an annual exercise that they've done almost every year. However, when I looked into it, there was nothing online about a wellness door-to-door check being done by the police and the Canadian Armed Forces. And I even talked to an ex-military personnel who said he's never heard of it either. So now I'm wondering, what is going on? Could the Canadian government be preparing us or maybe training us to see military personnel in our small towns as a normal thing, for them to come door to door to ask us how we're doing, in case Justin Trudeau goes full dictatorship on us again like he did in 2020. But let me just show you this video caught by Daisy Media, and then at the end of it, let me know what you think, or if you've ever seen this in any of your towns, small towns, specifically in the north, of the military coming to your door and asking you how you're doing.
Hi guys, good, how are you? You guys are part of the operation? Yeah, you're doing wellness checks? What's that? Oh, I know. Yeah, cool. Yeah, that's interesting. That's all that they said that you guys are doing? Really? Okay. All right. We got some more coming now. Hi guys. How are you? Good. Good. You guys part of the wellness check operation? Yeah? What, you mind telling us kind of what it is? Are you going door to door or?
Yeah, so it's just an annual thing that we do.
Okay.
Preparation and
Oh, really? Oh, it's annual? Because I never knew it was annual. Oh, really? Oh, interesting. Okay. Yeah, this is the first time I ever thought it was annual.
Yeah, well, we've never been here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we go all over the place every year.
Oh. Is the operation any sort of data collection that you're looking for at all? Or is this just knock on the door, how's it going?
Well, we all know they're lying. They're not gonna You know, they're not just going there for data collection. It's a lie right there. Okay, so we all heard about the migrant situation and how it's detrimental to our country, how it's detrimental to our citizens because the migrants are being hired to take away jobs from Americans. And let's check this out right here. It gets worse. Oh, it gets worse.
Third wave of migrants crossing the southern border, a suspected ISIS member who lived freely in the U.S. for nearly 2.
Hear that? ISIS. That back.
Among the record wave of migrants crossing the southern border, a suspected ISIS member who lived freely in the U.S. for nearly 2 years. 2 U.S. officials tell NBC News. 33-year-old Jakovir Atoyev of Uzbekistan crossed into Arizona in February 2022, where he was apprehended and vetted by both Customs and Border Protection and ICE. He was not on the U.S. terror watch list, and he was released into the U.S., those sources tell us. Then, in May 2023, Uzbekistan put out an international alert, saying that Atoyev was affiliated with ISIS and wanted there. But it took nearly a year for U.S. officials to figure out the suspected ISIS member was living freely here in the U.S. U.S. officials tell us DHS made the alarming discovery after reviewing Atoyev's application for asylum. Shortly after DHS connected the dots, ICE arrested him here in Baltimore just 2 weeks ago. Former Homeland Security officials tell us his case raises red flags about the vetting process for migrants after they cross the border. Should alarm bells be going off here?
We are in the midst of a really volatile threat environment. Anytime I see a gap in a system like we are seeing in this case, I do have concerns. Anytime you have just a massive volume of people like we do, our systems are overwhelmed, and we need more resources at the southern border to properly protect the homeland.
And it follows our exclusive report last month that a migrant U.S. officials say was affiliated with an Afghan terror group crossed the border and was released into the U.S. because agents lacked information to connect him to the terror watch list. That man, Mohammed Harwin, was arrested hours after our report aired. The FBI director recently alerted Congress the agency is investigating whether ISIS has a hand in smuggling migrants across the southern border.
There is a particular network that has where some of the overseas facilitators of the smuggling network have ISIS ties.
We have incompetence, just incompetence everywhere, from Washington to the border. I really do think it's on purpose. This isn't something that is an accident. They've been told not to do their jobs. That's what it is. Let's hear from RT today.
Washington's been widely accused of aiding and even helping form ISIS ever since it began trying to prop up so-called moderate rebels in the Syrian civil war about a decade ago. Taking a look at the vast majority of the terror group's recent attacks, a trend is clear to see. The victim nations are all enemies of the West.
Oddly enough, ISIS has adjusted its plans in recent years and now attacks mostly enemies of the United States, such as the Taliban in Afghanistan, the Iranians, the legitimate authorities in Syria, and Russia.
This year's seen multiple ISIS attacks around the world. In Iran, nearly 100 were killed and another 300 wounded. Afghanistan was the site of 3 terrorist attacks, and Niger lost over 50 people just a week ago. And of course, the terrorist campaign has recently arrived in Russia. What a coincidence that the West has a huge bone to pick with all of these countries. It goes without saying, though, the Islamic State's main targets have long known the rules of the game.
Our American colleagues have actually stopped fighting ISIS in the Arab country and have long been using the fighters they have nurtured exclusively for their own needs, including for sabotage against the Syrian government forces.
After 20 years of occupation, the Americans failed and had to withdraw. Today, they organize terrorist groups like ISIS to replace their military forces in Afghanistan. The U.S. does not want stability or an improvement in the economy, trade, and security in Afghanistan because it feels that if stability is established in Afghanistan, it will lead to the investment of countries like China, with which the Americans are in serious competition.
Even in the U.S., people are putting two and two together.
The police are corrupt. We created ISIS.
Well, why would Washington do such a thing? In the name of the U.S. occupation's continued extraction of Syria's resources.
There was no doubt the U.S. is the creator of ISIS. But for those who deliberately closed their eyes to the truth, the statement of Robert F. Kennedy, the nephew of John F. Kennedy, saying we created ISIS, reaffirms the fact that the American regime is the godfather of Daesh ISIS. The U.S. claims that it is present in Syria to fight Daesh, that itself had a major role in creating, is just an excuse to continue its occupation and loot Syria's national wealth, including its energy resources and wheat.
At the same time, the U.S. is trying to convince the world that ISIS was the only party behind the recent attack in Moscow and deflect any possibility of Ukrainian involvement.
Vladimir Putin is already trying to link this to Ukraine and say that Ukraine is responsible. Does the U.S. have any evidence to back that up?
No, there is no whatsoever any evidence. And in fact, what we know to be the case is that ISIS-K is actually, by all accounts, responsible for what happened.
With America's long track record of having shared interests with ISIS and Kiev's history of terrorist attacks in Russia, it seems unlikely that ISIS fighters just woke up one day and decided to attack Russia.
So as you can see, the government we live under has been creating enemies, has been causing other countries to hate us. All right. The United States' government is with Israel, regardless of Israel's corruption. And Israel has also created Hamas, which people don't talk about. There's a lot that when you find out more, that our government has a hand in creating almost, if not all, the enemies that we have. And now our government is letting terrorists in our border. All right. Let's talk about another terrorist state, and that would be Ukraine. Let's talk about that. What they plan to do to people who have sense that they don't want to continue this war. They're tired of it, and they just want to live their lives. What they're doing to Ukrainian citizens. Ukraine to block bank accounts of draft dodgers. This could happen to those unable to pay increased fines for violating mobilization rules, Audrey Oshidik has said. Ukraine could start blocking bank accounts and imposing penalties on the property of those trying to avoid military service amid the conflict with Russia. Andrei Oshadik, a member of the country's parliament, the Verkhovna Rada, has said. The measure might be applied to draft dodgers in line with a law that introduces stricter penalties for breaching the country's mobilization rules, which the MPs voted on last month, Ojek told journalists on Thursday. Under the legislation that will go into force sometime in late May, the fines for violations of the military registration rules for individuals have been increased between 17,000 around $430 and 250,000 hryvnia around $520, he said, as cited by Unanian News Agency. This is a big sum for someone in Kyiv and for me, but for some provincial towns and villages, it is a gigantic sum, the MP said. Because of the hefty penalties, we will most likely have a situation when these fines will not be paid by citizens on a mass scale, as they simply may not have the money or will just not want to do it, he warned. In this case, an enforcement procedure is activated against non-payers, which makes it possible to block accounts and impose a penalty on the property owned by those individuals, Ashik explained. The MP noted that denying those unwilling to serve access to their money was among the proposals included in the initial proposed mobilization law, which was submitted to the Ukrainian parliament last year. The Verkhovna Rada rejected the measure as unconstitutional. It was eventually removed from the bill that was passed. He added, however, now a scheme will be launched that will allow the government to block accounts from draft dodgers through what are, in principle, absolutely legal means. I should stress, last month, Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky signed a new mobilization law amid troop shortages experienced by Kyiv's forces on the front lines. Now, remember now, it's so bad that they enlisted people with Down syndrome. I said it, Down syndrome. The legislation lowers the conscription age from 27 to 25, greatly expands the powers of enlistment officers, and introduces assorted restrictions for draft dodgers. The country's foreign ministry has suspended consular services for military-eligible Ukrainians abroad in preparation for the mobilization reform that is slated to come into effect later in May. Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu said last week that Ukrainian military casualties this year alone have mounted to more than 111,000. 111,000. And Zelensky doesn't care. He doesn't give a damn. He wants it to keep going by any means necessary. All right. But speaking of bank accounts, let's talk about what's happening in Australia right now. Okay. Comes to Australia's dealing with bank bans and forcing people to adopt CBDCs. Let's get into that right now.
Cash at some branches. More than bringing John King, economics editor of the Australian Financial Review, the boss, as we like to call him. Good morning, Johnny. I mean, what are us wogs going to do now?
How are we going to put our money under the mattress anymore, Carl? This is interesting, isn't it? Because ANZ, some of their branches are now not going to be doing over-the-counter transactions for cash, such as, withdrawals and deposits. Instead, they're going to be switching to these what's known as smart ATMs, where you can do all the fancy business with those, but obviously for some customers, older customers, this may present a bit of a challenge. ANZ says there'll still be people in the branch to help customers use these new smart ATMs, but look, I think this is more broadly a window into the future of banking, because cash transactions are declining. We're going to see more of this across banks.
I thought it's just like...
That's what's going on. That is what's going on. Let's see what another news story about this.
A local woman rocked up to her bank to withdraw cash, only to be told they didn't have any. Taryn Compton wanted to grab some notes to pay a tradie, but when she got to the ANZ ATM, she realised she'd forgotten her EFTPOS card. When she asked the teller for the money instead, she was told the bank doesn't carry cash.
And Taryn Compton's here to tell us all about her terrible banking experience. Taryn, what did you think when you walked into a bank only to be told they don't have cash?
I thought it was absolutely crazy. I thought she must have misheard what I wanted, if I'm honest. How can you go to a bank and not be able to get your own money out?
Taryn, that's what I'm confused about. So what's in the bank if there's no cash? Isn't there, if you open up the safe, what's in there? How did they explain it to you?
They just said, I'm so sorry, we can't help you. There's nothing we can do. We don't have cash here.
So did you think maybe that was a temporary situation? That maybe they were going to get some cash tomorrow?
Imagine if that happens here. Imagine that. You got to have banks shutting down across the country. All right. People are not talking about these stories. I don't get it. This is not a joke, people. This is actually happening. This is actually happening. All right. Australia's biggest banks cash force customers to adopt CBDCs, lose everything. The World Economic Forum-controlled nation of Australia is forcing the public to switch to central bank digital currency system and has warned citizens that they risk losing all their money if they refuse. One of Australia's biggest banks, Macquarie Bank, told customers last week that it will completely eliminate cash this year. And if customers refuse to use CBDCs, they will owe nothing. In case you missed, we're phasing out our cash and check services from all products. To prepare for this change, you will need to start transacting digitally. It's a safe, quick, and more convenient way to bank. We're moving our cash and check facilities in a phased approach. The bank says customers will no longer be able to access a list of over-the-counter services at Macquarie's physical locations, nor deposit or collect checks or order new checkbooks. From Friday 1st, November 2024, you'll be able to write or deposit personal checks, deposit or request bank checks, deposit cash or checks over the counter at NAB branches, make a super contribution, or pay via check. Once the changes are rolled out, Marquee customers will only be able to withdraw paper money from their accounts using ATMs owned by rival banks, with withdrawals capped at 2,000 AUD per day. The move comes amid a broader shift away from cash across the country. A total of 424 banks, representing 11% of all banks in Australia, will close from June 2022 and June 2023, to the Australian Prudential Regulation Authority, APRA. At the same time, banks remove access to 718 ATMs. Australians held a rally on April 2nd to protest the widespread closures and bring attention to the country's move away from cash. This is wild, people. This is some wild stuff right here. But let's talk about something. We'll talk about TikTok right now and how they plan to strike back.
TikTok is fighting back. The Chinese social media app is suing the U.S. government to prevent implementation of the recently signed law that would force the parent company, ByteDance, to sell the app to a U.S. company or be banned in the United States. This is a free speech issue from TikTok's perspective, and we're going to find out what happens in the courts. So we're coming to a place, Brianna, that was predicted that this would eventually end up in the courts to find out whether this is a violation of the First Amendment. I was thinking about it, excuse me, more carefully, and really it's in some ways it's the violation, if there is a violation of the First Amendment, it's almost on the part of almost not TikTok itself, but it's Americans who want to use TikTok, or frankly other companies that would have to be forbidden from hosting the app in the in Amazon Web Services, the Apple Store, those kinds of things. Those companies are the ones facing the restriction, right? They want to have this app, TikTok, and the law will now say you can't have TikTok unless if it has not sold to an American company. And so we will work that out, but it's very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, the language of the suit certainly is trying to lean on the consequences for American users. It says, for the first time in history, Congress has enacted a law that subjects a single named speech platform to a permanent nationwide ban and bars every American from participating in a unique online community with more than 1 billion people worldwide. It points out that to the extent that there is a counter argument that it's not actually a TikTok ban, it's just a forced sale. It says that that's constructively a ban because it is not commercially, technologically, or legally possible to sell the company, especially within the 270 days that it's been given. Either there are companies that are not big enough and rich enough to buy it, and those that are would likely be hit with antitrust issues. Now, the people who designed the ban obviously anticipated this, and it is likely that this is going to be a tough fight. But I think the real kind of material outcome of them having filed this suit is that it is going to put the 270 days they have for a sale on hold and basically give them a longer period of time until the ban actually will come into effect as they litigate this case.
So the law does specifically mention TikTok, which I think is a problem on its own, but it also it theoretically could apply to other social media apps as well. The language in the bill is foreign adversary controlled application. Right now, U.S. law designates China, North Korea, Russia, and Iran as foreign adversaries. And then, so what constitutes a foreign adversary?
Foreign adversary is China, right? But China has so much stake in this country. They bought up so much property. Our government, has a bunch of debt towards China. They owe the Chinese government a lot of money. Foreign adversary, you owe them money, and they buy property here. They have their own police station here. Are they really an adversary? Or are you guys just mad that TikTok refuses to sell to an American company and just making up a bunch of lies?
Adversary controlled application. It's if you are,
because of the fact they want to control media.
If you are satisfied one of three different criteria, if you're headquartered in one of those countries, if the government owns a 20% stake in your company, or, and this was the language that really worried me, is subject to direction or control by one of the foreign adversaries. And given how slippery the rhetoric was around social media apps, other social media companies being controlled or directed by Russia, by China, etc., all the, I think at times very lazy proclamations by journalists and by national security experts that these platforms are flooded with foreign-originated misinformation. I'm really worried about that same language being applied to Facebook or Twitter or other companies. And so we'll find out if that language pass muster, if that survives a First Amendment challenge. I think the ACLU says they're interested in getting involved, other free speech advocacy groups.
Yeah, the lawsuit points out that Congress hasn't actually provided any proof of the data security risks that it alleges, and that would conceivably justify a ban of this nature. And that combined with the many explicit statements, most recently from Anthony Blinken, admitting that what gave this law traction, what gave the ban traction, was the perception that the kids were seeing too much ugly stuff being perpetrated by Israel in Gaza and affecting public opinion.
Yeah, you want to control the press. You don't want Israel to be found out to be the bad guy here. Don't get me wrong. Yeah, okay. The Palestinians got their dirt too. But the whole reason why this all started was because of Israel. Okay, if you check back, not just October 7th, this has been happening for 70 years. Okay, since its inception, okay, in the 1940s. All right. This didn't just start October 7th. Don't believe what mainstream media is telling you about that. All right. The Zionists, okay, let's get that clear. The Zionists, I'm not against all of Israel. I'm against Zionism, okay? Those people started this mess that we're in, that the American people are dragged in right now, that tax dollars are going over to Israel. The Zionist government, the ethno-terrorist state that wants you to believe that they're the victim. Yet they're the ones bulldozing Palestinian homes, okay, desecrating Palestinian graves, all right? Just being absolutely evil to these people and evil to their own people. Okay. When Netanyahu shut down the Iron Dome and let his own people get massacred just to have a land grab. Okay. They don't want that information coming out. They want to be looked upon as the victims, and Palestinians are the bad people. That's what they want.
Really, I think, is a strong argument for TikTok to say none of this was about whether or not China was actually controlling anything. They haven't shown any proof of that. What they're upset about is that they can't control their own internal media narratives, and we're the ones that have to take the fall for it.
Right, and the issue.
And that's basically what it is. They can't stand that. They don't like that, and they are very, very ticked off about that. They don't like that at all. And the American people are going to have to find a new way to get information. Those of us who are awake to the nonsense from mainstream media, those of us are going to have to find a new way to find out information. When they're lying to us, we have to find the information from alternative sources to find out the truth. All right, that's all I got for now. Tell me what you think in the comments. Like, share, comment, subscribe. Anything you want to know about this channel is in the description box. That's about it. Later.